Hello and welcome to my third step in how to start your healing health and fat release journey. So step 3 is become a label detective. Learn to read labels if you are buying anything in a box, a packet, or basically anything with an ingredients list on. Never ever assume that something won't be in something you're buying. So, for example, don't make the mistake of assuming that because something is savory, it doesn't contain sugar, because most of the time it will, because sugar is used to make foods that are low fat, for example, more palatable. So to make them taste better to us. And so I'm just going to go through a few examples of things which kind of look healthy. So at a quick glance, you might be thinking, oh, yeah, I'm doing a good thing by buying that. But in actual fact, there are some surprises if you look a little bit deeper and you actually read the ingredients and you start to look at the nutritional information on the label. So I'm going to start with porridge, because so many people are still really surprised when they first start working with me and they tell me they have porridge for breakfast and they feel like they're doing a really good thing for their health. And I say, well, that might not actually be serving you particularly well. And I want to just put a little kind of, sort of extra bit of information to that in there. It depends what your health goals are. Okay, so if you're a completely healthy person and you don't need to lose any body fat and your metabolic health is bang on and you're having porridge for breakfast every morning, then why change it? I wouldn't recommend that you change it. I very much believe in that. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. However, if you're coming to see me for advice, chances are you might well benefit from not having porridge for breakfast. And obviously, I'd explain that in more detail. So anyway, start with the porridge. So I bought this a little while ago. This is just a cinnamon porridge pot. So something that, busy people, say you have your breakfast at work, or just you have a very busy life, or you've been taken in by the incredibly brilliant marketing and advertising by a lot of these foods, and you think that's a healthy option. You wouldn't be to blame. I mean, it's very compelling. So let's just turn it around. So you can see it's a cinnamon porridge pot. I don't know if there's any of you out there that kind of really, have heard before that cinnamon's good for you. There's some talk about how cinnamon increases insulin sensitivity, and that's a good thing. Okay, so it's kind of like a bit healthy. So here's where, probably a bit tricky to see on here because it might be back to front, but here's where you'd look for the nutritional information. Okay, so you look for this bit. And the first thing you need to do is you need to just have a look at how much is in the actual pot. So we're talking 57 grams here. And very often they will talk about these nutritional values in terms of per 100 grams or per pot or per bar, but not always. So you have to get really savvy. So my rule of thumb about how much sugar, just sugar, added sugar, is acceptable if you are someone who is looking to improve your metabolic health or to release some excess fat, particularly anything that's sitting around your middle, then you'll need to be looking at this. So here we go. Oh, yes, sorry. So you need to be looking at these things, looking at the sugar, and you don't want to be buying anything that has more than 5 grams per 100 grams of sugar. Okay, so where would you look for that? You look for carbohydrates, and then underneath carbohydrates on most of these packets, you will see of which sugars. Okay, so again, I'm keeping this pretty top line today, but carbohydrates, a lot of those carbohydrates, if they're not fiber, will end up as sugar. Okay, so carbohydrates is an umbrella term for sugar, starch, and fiber. Fiber you can take out of your count, but particularly in something like this where it's all refined, most of the carbohydrates in there will end up as sugar. And for example, we can see that on this pot. Fiber is labeled as 2 grams. So if we go to total carbohydrates per pot, let's go per pot because they make it easy for us. There's 39 grams of carbohydrates in this pot, and only 2 grams of them are fiber. So you take the 2 grams off the 39 grams and you count that as 37 grams of carbohydrate in this one serving pot of porridge. Okay, and so all of those 37 grams of carbohydrate will become sugar when you eat them. Again, another topic. This is really about how to read labels, but I explain this too. Okay, so let's just have a look at sugars. Okay, so in this pot, so here we go. We've got per pot, there's 14 grams of sugar. So just to put that into context, the World Health Organization recommend that an adult in a day eats no more than 30 grams of added sugar in a day. Okay, so in this one pot in your breakfast, you've already reached half your total daily limit, according to the World Health Organization, for the amount of sugar you can have in a day to be healthy. Actually, it should be a lot less than that, but you can just, it gives you an idea. So in that pot of so-called healthy porridge, there's 14 grams. And do you know what? I'm just double checking that because I can't believe it's that much. 14 grams. Okay. Cool. So that helps with that. That's the porridge. And then I have got another example here. I've got a so-called healthy, and I'm doing that because I wouldn't say that this is particularly healthy, but it's definitely marketed as a healthy alternative. And then teeny weeny writing on the back of this, but this is an example where, for example, this is labeled per bar or per 100 grams. You can just see here. So really, you know, going back to that, no more than 5 grams per 100 grams. You want to look at per 100 grams. This has carbohydrates, of which sugars. So that's almost always labeled like that. Look for the carbohydrates, and then just underneath it will say of which sugars. So look for the sugars. This in 100 grams, okay, healthy bar contains 26.9 grams of sugar. Okay, in a bar, so if you just ate the bar, you would be eating 13.4 grams of sugar and 19.3 grams of carbohydrate, of which fiber is 6.9 grams. So again, you take the 6.9 grams off the 19.3 grams. Okay, if your brain's still hanging on in there, but it's really, you just subtract the fiber off the total carbohydrates. Okay. So again, that's a lot. And when you're talking about fat release, particularly from around the middle, you want to be reducing the refined carbohydrates, which will become sugars when you eat them. You want to be reducing that. So that's not a good option. Okay. Okay, so that is that one. And just to go back and sort of try to make it sort of a bit more real in terms of sugar and why it's so important that we don't have big doses of sugar at a time when we eat. If you took the entire amount of blood that is circulating around our bodies at any time, our entire blood volume, at any one time, our body controls the amount of sugar, blood glucose, in our blood to be between 4 or 5 grams. It controls it very tightly. The reason it does that is because sugar, free sugar floating around in our blood system, is incredibly damaging to every single organ, to all of our blood vessels, to our eyes, to our nerves, everything in our bodies. Okay, so that's why we have the hormone insulin. It's there to pack the sugar away when we eat it nice and tidily and safely inside cells and tissues like our muscle, our fat, and our livers. Okay, and then finally, as an example, I've got something savory, like I mentioned at the beginning. So you might think gluten-free. I recommend that people don't have gluten quite often, but on a personal basis, a personalized basis. But a lot of people look at gluten-free and think, oh, I'll lose weight. That'll be a good way to lose weight. So if that's you, beware, because if we look at the ingredients in these crisp breads, we've got rice flour, maize flour, sugar, and salt. And if we then look at the nutritional information here, okay, again, let's look at, so per 100 grams in here, there's 6 grams of sugar. So again, if you go by that, everything should have 5 grams or less per 100 grams. These would be out. You wouldn't buy them. So they've got 6 grams. And then they take this down to 1 crisp bread. So in 1 crisp bread, there's just under 0.5 gram of sugar. But if you then look at carbohydrate, because there's a very small amount of fiber in here, there's 2.3 grams of fiber per 100 grams, but there's 84 grams of carbohydrate per 100 grams. So pretty much all carbohydrate. And then what you have to think about, and this is the other consideration, is anything that's ground. Flour is effectively powder. So think of flour as powdered something, powdered grain, in this case, powdered rice and powdered maize. That means that it's already incredibly refined, which means that when you eat it, it becomes sugar, single sugar molecules. So sugar very fast, like literally by the time you swallow it. So again, these will have a big effect on your insulin levels. And if you're someone who is pre-diabetic, trying to lose some fat around your middle, or you even have type 2 diabetes already, this is really bad news. So I hope that helps. And I will see you soon for step number 4.